in the U.S. Senate in the Environmental and Public Works Committee, climate researcher, and he's a communication director. He was a speechwriter also for Senator Jim Inhofe's, say yay for Senator Jim Inhofe's Senate Committee. And now Mark is the executive editor for Climate Depot. That's not Office Depot, that's Climate Depot, an eco and climate news service. And we could all use some truth on those two topics. And now please join me in welcoming Marc Morano.
Thank you. Thank you, Amanda, very much. Thank you for Freedom 21. I come to you from Washington, D.C. right now, not a place many of you probably want to be or go to at this moment, or probably for many years, actually. As she mentioned, I was our man in Washington for Rush Limbaugh, the television show, and I covered that for 4 years during Rush's TV show. I would put our reporting on Rush Limbaugh, the television show, up against anything the three networks or CNN did back in the 90s or today. We actually covered all the marches in Washington, animal rights marches, the environmental marches, the feminist marches, and we covered them accurately. It was amazing. Animal rights marches would be covered by the mainstream media as a bunch of people down there just concerned about welfare of animals. But when you went down there, they had booths set up and speakers calling for the end, a moratorium on road building to end roadkill of animals. And they actually considered them pretty moderate because they didn't call for the repeal of existing roads. But there was serious extreme activism in Washington that was whitewashed by the mainstream media. And that's one of the things we did with Rush Limbaugh. I also worked in Amazon rainforest documentary in 2000. And we showed that the rainforests were the least endangered forests, the most intact, and they were regenerating just fine and actually expanding in many places. Fast forward to this year, the New York Times in January admits that what they call the galloping jungles. For every acre of rainforest cut, 50 are growing back. So now we have the New York Times, they're now saying maybe it wasn't such an urgent issue after all. And keep in mind, in the 1970s, we had global cooling scares, we had chemical fears, we had famine scares, we had overpopulation, resource scarcity. In the 80s, you had all the rainforest scares. This is what Sting's rainforest concerts were all about in the 90s. And then all of those fell to the wayside. All became scientifically invalid. Now we have global warming. So the question is, what is going on with the state of global warming today? And I think you'll find this just shocking at what's actually going on in the peer-reviewed journals and in the scientific community when it comes to global warming. So as you know, Climate Depot, I like to think of it like Home Depot, except for all your climate needs. I update it throughout the day. It has all the latest eco and climate news. And let's start this presentation. I'm going to go through the basics of climate science, and then we're going to get into some of the things that have been happening in Washington. I think it'll be an eye-opener. This is Newsweek magazine. Just this week, the United Nations came out and said that we had only 4 months to secure the future of our planet, that our children and grandchildren were relying on us. In other words, in 4 months, Christmas, is the next UN climate conference in Copenhagen, and they want another Kyoto Protocol. So they've given us 4 months to save the planet. The same UN in 1989 gave us 10 years to save the planet. Al Gore has given us less than 10 years. Prince Charles has given us 96 more months to save the planet. Here's Newsweek magazine. The longer the planners delay, the more difficult they will find it to cope with climatic change once the results become grim reality. Newsweek sounds like they're just jumping on the bandwagon of recent quotes, right? Not exactly. That quote about tipping points was from 1975 in Newsweek, and they were referring to a coming ice age. It just goes to show you the more things change, the more they stay the same. Same rhetoric, different eco-scare. Just some of the basic science there. No statistically significant warming since 95. No warming since 98, and cooling by all temperature monitors the last few years. The UK Meteorological Office, a big hotbed of scientists who believe in man-made global warming fears, conceded in 2007 that global warming had stopped, but they said it'll begin in earnest in 2009. This is one of my favorite quotes. Geologist David G. of Sweden, for how many years must the planet cool before we begin to understand the planet is not warming? Basic question, that Al Gore and the United Nations can't answer? April 2008, study in peer-reviewed journal, global warming will stop until at least 2015 because of natural variations. Did anyone hear the phrase natural variations in Al Gore's film? So what are they saying now? It's 2009. March 2009 study. Now global warming may stop for up to 3 decades. The trend could continue for 3 decades. Peer-reviewed scientific study. This is what they're reduced to now if you go on any street corner in the U.S. The warmers are getting more and more like the traditional predictors of the end of the world, who, when the event fails to happen on the due date, announce an error in their calculations and a new due date. And that's what we just witnessed here. These are the major organs of man-made global warming, just pushing back the doom. Now, if these studies are correct, 3 decades and no warming, let's see what this means. High school students today, this is an 18-year-old in 2007, I really don't understand why they keep showing it, Al Gore's film. He watched it 4 times in 4 different classes. It's being shown in elementary schools. I was just in Missouri yesterday, and a high school class came to the Scientists for Truth conference, a skeptical conference, to balance out having just seen Al Gore's film the day before. Now, if high school kids are watching Al Gore's film, that means if warming were to pause for another 3 decades, they'll be nearly eligible for ARP, age 50 retirement age, when warming resumes. So you're talking, since 98, no warming, we're talking 40 years of no global warming. That's a generation of people growing up without even rising temperatures. So what do they say now? Well, now they're saying, remember the end is near? Well, the end is 3 decades away. 30 years of warming will be there, and bang! It'll return and be aggressive. So now they're warning us about 3 decades from now. This is one of the skeptical scientists' response. Now I understand. The boogeyman can't be seen because he's hiding under the bed, but he's going to jump out and be aggressive. Just wait 30 years because it will happen. This is what they're reduced to now. But the reality check on waiting 30 years, there's no heat in the oceans, there's no heat within the troposphere, there's no warming in the pipeline. The concept that warming is hiding somewhere or being masked by natural variations, and then it's going to come out and scare the hell out of us, isn't scientifically valid either. New studies just last month. Nature, not man, responsible for the warming since the 70s. Surge in global temps is a shift in ocean circulation. This is huge. This was not mentioned on CNN, CBS, ABC, NBC, The Washington Post, New York Times, peer-reviewed journal. So what does the UN say about CO2? It's a trace essential gas. We inhale oxygen, we exhale CO2. UN lead scientist. You have to think of CO2 more as nuclear waste. The more we add, the worse off we'll be. Nuclear waste. Imagine teaching elementary school kids or high school science that CO2 is like nuclear waste. It's become a farce. The reality, we had William Happer, Princeton physicist, 200 peer-reviewed scientific studies under his belt. Earth is in a CO2 famine. The increase is not a cause for alarm and will be good for mankind. So what happens when reality bites and you can't get the catastrophe today? Well, let's go out and do some predictions. Hey, how about a 1,000-year climate prediction? The same lady who says CO2 is nuclear waste, the UN's Susan Solomon, is now trying to predict sea level in the year 3000. That's my vision of what the year 3000 would be like, flying backpacks. I wonder how much CO2 those backpacks are emitting there. But and the other thing that's shocking is she only predicts up to a 3-foot rise in sea level, which isn't very much. If you're going to come up with a prediction way down the road, why not make it scary as hell? I mean, she missed the point on that. If 3,000 isn't enough, let's go for 2,000. In the year 4,000, they're now trying to, there's another study predicting sea level up to 25 meters. So if the catastrophe is failing today, keep everyone scared. The end is near / the end is in 4000 AD. So I would tell your great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren that they better be worried about beachfront property in the year 4000. This is what's going on right now with some $80 billion being spent in the U.S. alone on climate research. It's going into studies like this, worrying about the sea level rise in the year 4000 AD. And by the way, AD is probably not even a politically acceptable term anymore. So hundreds of things caused by global warming. This is just everything from bananas growing to animals shrinking, Some of the things here, global warming may make humans work in office blocks modeled on termite nests. And that's my vision. Talk about sick building syndrome. It doesn't look like much ventilation, no windows. Global warming could be causing a kitten boom. And one of my favorites, global warming may up kidney stone risk. Imagine people calling their congressman, we must pass this climate bill. I don't want to have kidney stones in a couple years. I mean, this is the kind of stuff, the money is going to these kind of studies. Failure to warm causes problems. July 2009, over 3,000 cold temperature records in the U.S. Crops, peaches, blueberries, corn, wheat suffered record cold. Global temperatures falling in recent years. Keep in mind, it used to be called the medieval climate optimum, back when Greenland was green and they settled it back at 1000 to 1300 AD. It was called optimum for a reason. Warm weather equaled life. Warm weather is friendly to humans, plants, animals. If you look at Earth today, where is most of the biodiversity? At the equator. What's at the equator? The hottest temperatures. Where's the least biodiversity in plant life? At the poles. What's at the poles? The coldest temperatures. It's logic, but they've tried to turn it into warming is evil and deadly, and they're finding out now, and cold kills. Cold snaps kill many times more people than any heat waves do, and we're finding all these crops suffered during this year without a summer in many parts of the U.S. So how do they spin global cooling and the year without a summer? What are the environmental activists, the global warming fear promoters, how are they spinning this? No joke. Global warming made it less cool. That's the Union of Concerned Scientists. Now imagine, instead of wearing 2 jackets this summer, you only needed 1. Thank God for global warming. And we had in Al Gore's hometown of Nashville, broke the temperature record when Rutherford B. Hayes was president, I believe 1877. If we didn't have global warming, we probably would have broken the record when George Washington was president. I mean, this is what they're reduced to. This is their level of spin. Global warming. We went from global warming is going to kill us all, we're going to roast the planet, to global warming made it less cool. Now, we have cooling, so wait a minute. Global warming isn't about warming. Did we say global warming? We didn't mean rising temperatures. That's not what global warming is. Whoever said global warming was about warming temperatures? Certainly not Debbie Stabenow, the senator. Quote, climate change is not just about temperatures going up, it's also about volatility. So when temperatures fail to cooperate, that's why you change the name to climate change. That's why they want to call it global weirding, because they don't want to deal with global warming if the temperatures aren't going to cooperate. So how do you react? Peer-reviewed studies, real-world data, swelling number of scientists, public opinion, which I'll get into a little bit later, turning on them. Same senator, my favorite quote just a couple days ago. Global warming creates volatility. I feel it when I'm flying. The storms are more volatile. Now, how many were delayed? I was delayed coming because of thunderstorms. Global warming delayed all the flights of all you who came here because of the storms. This is the best and brightest they have offering. Big supporters of global warming bills coming out. This is what they have to offer. This is the logic they're employing. I call it touchy-feely warming. So, if you don't have the actual data, if the peer review is failing you, if the number of scientists is failing you, if even your predictions of doom 30 years from now are without basis, what do? Nobel Prize-winning economist. You have to find ways to exaggerate the threat. He just said this a couple weeks ago to the Atlantic magazine. Why am I showing a picture of a tornado destroying a house? Same economist, Nobel Prize winning. I sometimes wish we could have over the next 5 or 10 years a lot of horrid things happening. You know, like tornadoes in the Midwest and so forth. That would get people concerned about climate change, unquote. That's insane. He's wishing for death and destruction on people so that he can convince people that his ideology of catastrophic global warming is correct. This is the level a Nobel Prize winner now, one of the leading lights of the global warming movement, this is what they're reduced to. These are not made up quotes, they're not cherry-picked quotes, these are in mainstream publications. Only Fox News reported on this comment about a Nobel winner wishing for death and destruction in the Midwest so that people would be more convinced of climate change. Well, let's play the game. How is his Nobel Prize winning Tom Schilling, how is that wish turning out so far? It's been now, I don't want to jinx anything, but it's been an unusually mild year in Tornado Alley. but a little frustrating to scientists who plan to chase twisters as part of a $10 million research project. And we have to spend this research money. To hell with the people, to hell with safety. Where are the tornadoes? This is what money does in science. The AP writes an article headlined, "Mild Season Frustrates Scientists." Think about that. It's all because they have money to spend. If they don't spend the money, they probably won't get as much next year. So they're out there wishing for tornadoes, wishing for death and destruction. And this is the AP, continued, the same article. This was just July 30th, 2 weeks ago. During a remarkable 17-day lull, there were no tornadoes issued anywhere in the U.S. My favorite line, meteorologists are attributing the calm not to anything dire like global warming, but to shifts in the jet stream. How about that? No tornadoes is natural. The New York Times in 2000 blamed a record warm winter on global warming. Whole article. Just this year without a summer where New York broke every cold record, going back to the 1900s, the New York Times blamed natural variations and said skeptics shouldn't be buoyed. So when it's warm, it's global warming. When it's cold, well, it's just natural variations. I mean, their spin is infantile. Now, if you can't wish for tornadoes, and you start worrying about other natural disasters, droughts. You hear all the politicians talk about how bad droughts are. Well, if you can't get a drought naturally, hey, California farmers say federal policy, not Mother Nature, to blame for drought. So if Mother Nature won't deliver, we're going to have a drought either way. And this is the whole new movement now. President Obama, his Commerce Secretary Gary Locke. Americans should be required to pay for the carbon content of imports to help avoid climate catastrophe. Mother Nature, I call this a mob-like operation. That's why I have a picture of the Godfather. In other words, Obama's Commerce Secretary is out literally telling people, pay up or you're going to face bodily harm and loss of property. These are the henchmen. It's like you own a property. The Commerce Secretary is coming to you and saying, you know, this climate guy, he's not going to like this. We need you to pay up or else you're going to face some really bad situation, floods, droughts, sea levels. We got to have the money or you're going to lose your store. You could get hurt. There's no difference. They're acting as though they're agents of Mother Earth. One of my favorite lines, science without debate is propaganda. Now, I just mentioned all the stuff happening, peer-reviewed journal. So what do you do? Aside from exaggerating the threat, aside from manufacturing droughts, aside from the end is near, keep pushing off the date, how else can you silence people and win the debate? This was Talking Points Memo, a website used by MSNBC and Air America and all the political left in America. At what point do we jail or execute global warming deniers? Shouldn't we start punishing them now? June 3rd, 2009. This was up for a day. We got it. Drudge ended up picking it up. We featured it at Climate Depot. They ended up pulling the site, and then they ended up issuing an apology. The problem was this is in line with what James Hansen, NASA scientist, has called for crimes against humanity for people who are delaying action on global warming. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has said it's equivalent of treason to deny the UN's view of global warming. Tom Friedman, New York Times columnist, just in July, said it was treason against the planet, the congressman who voted against the climate bill. Grist magazine, a huge environmental magazine, has called for Nuremberg-style trials for global warming skeptics. So it's completely in line. It just keeps coming out. They want to suppress the debate. They refuse the debate. They want to conjure up images of Holocaust deniers by using the word global warming denier. And they also want to kill people, it sounds like. Joe Rome is a former Clinton administration official, works for Climate Progress, the John Podesta, Hillary Clinton group. He says that the information I present on my website, much of what I just showed you, he calls it disinformation. He says it, quote, may be responsible for unspeakable misery and or violence to billions of people, unquote. I feel so powerful. The reality is the UN, only 52 scientists participated in the summary for policymakers that you heard all about in the media. All these science groups, National Academy of Science, American Meteorological, have only 24 or so governing board members vote on these consensus statements. It is not, and they can sometimes represent 50,000 scientists. We're finding the rank and file scientists are rebelling against these statements. These are political. Both these things are political. When someone cites, well, this so-and-so science group's issued a 2-sentence statement agreeing with the UN, that's a political statement. When the UN does anything, it's called the Intergovernmental Panel. Where do people not miss the word government in there? It's a political organization founded in 1988. It has to find CO2 as the cause of warming, or it ceases to have a reason to exist. So anyone who cites the UN to you is insulting your intelligence. This is a UK scientist who says UN is purely political body posing as a scientific institution. We released our Senate report in March. I updated it before I left the Senate. We'll be updating again this fall. Over 700 international scientists, 13 times the number of UN. They keep coming out. We were averaging 3 scientists a week, and many of them are only coming out because Al Gore has compared skeptics to those who think the moon landing was faked, despite the fact that 2 moonwalkers themselves have declared themselves skeptical. Gore doesn't even do basic research. His whole analogy has been humiliated. They've come out because the head of the UN has compared skeptics to Flat Earth Society members. So those 2 comments are driving skeptics out of all over the world to speak out and say nonsense. And they're using strong words like hoax, scam, fraud. One Japanese scientist said it's the greatest scientific. A UN scientist said it's the greatest scientific scandal of our age. What's happening with man-made climate fears. The real story, when you get to rank and file scientists, not the governing board leadership, the ones that have political and financial and media ambition, canvas of 51,000 scientists, 68% disagree that the cause of climate change is settled. Only 26% attributed human activity to warming. This is shocking. Every 4 years, a huge geologic event is held in Norway. It's called the Olympic Events because it's every 4 years, the most prestigious geologic event in the world. Last summer's 2/3 of the presenters were dismissive or hostile to the UN IPCC. You didn't read about this in Time, Newsweek, ABC, CNN. This is the scientific community. This is what we should be paying attention to. When scientific groups are overrun with skeptics, something's afoot. Survey Japanese symposium, 90% did not believe the IPCC report. The American Chemical Society just had a big revolt, and that's what this is right here. Their editor did an op-ed supporting the climate bill, supporting Al Gore, the UN, all the usual alarmist talking points. There is now an open rebellion in the world's largest scientific body. They are, quote, seeking to remove him and trade their editor to the New York Times or Washington Post, where he'd be much more at home than trying to speak for scientists. Just basics, the Earth is well within natural variability. Climate fear generated by unproven computer models, which even the UN says aren't predictions, they're merely emission scenarios. And forecasting experts say these computer models violate the basic principles of forecasting. Abundance of new peer-reviewed studies and consensus manufactured for political, not scientific purposes. These are what a whole host of the scientists used to believe in the 90s and the early part of this century. Ice core data, all this new peer-reviewed studies, scientists are reversing themselves. This is one of them, David Bellamy. He says the science has quite simply gone awry. It's not even science anymore, it's anti-science. Remember the phrase anti-science. Now think back to the Nobel Prize winner who wants tornadoes to kill people to convince them of global warming. That is anti-science. That is science going awry, as he says here. Al Gore's picture was not put here for any, there's no subliminal message. But one South African UN scientist, the whole climate change issue is about to fall apart. Heads will roll. And this is one of the premier UN scientists in South Africa. They're losing their own people. The UN can't keep the UN scientists together anymore. Okay, why am I showing the Capitol? And wait a minute, what are those people? That's snow at the Capitol? Are they holding signs? What is that? Let me see a little closer. Oh my gosh, big DC snowstorm greets largest public protest of global warming ever in U.S. This was a spring snowstorm in March, the biggest we had of the winter in Washington. Someone has a sense of humor up there. Headline, out with a shiver, global warming protest frozen out by massive snowfall. And my favorite, Pelosi snowed out of DC global warming rally. You can't pay for mockery or public relations like this. This was the sweetest moment of the year. It was just total mockery. And they were out there. I mean, it was a blinding snowstorm. They were out there that day, and they were out there acting like a couple groups actually tried to argue that it was global warming caused this unusual March big snowstorm because it's causing freaky weather. The BBC went with this on a different story. 300 Peruvian kids died in an early frost, a brutal record cold in Peru, and they said it was blamed on global warming, unusual weather. So we'll get to that in a moment, how they've changed the definition. But first of all, Washington, what are they up to? Gore, I saw a lot of stuff on global governance here. Just in July 10th, there was a Climate Depot exclusive, by the way. The U.S. climate bill will help bring about global governance. Does that sound like a scientific motive? Jacques Chirac, former French president. Kyoto represents the first component of an authentic global governance. Margot Wallström of the EU. Kyoto is about the economy. It's about leveling the playing field for big business worldwide. Leveling the playing field. Former Colorado Senator Timothy Worth said it best: even if the theory of warming is wrong, we will be doing the right thing in terms of economic policy and environmental policy. So you see, science doesn't matter. Global warming doesn't matter. Let's plug in global cooling. Let's plug in rainforest. Let's plug in famine scares. Let's plug in overpopulation. Whatever the scare of the day is, it doesn't matter because they have economic and environmental policies they want to achieve, and they need some kind of eco scare to make it happen. Had we ratified Kyoto, the numbers at the bottom are the largest previous tax increases in U.S. history, and that's the cost that Kyoto would have been on the U.S. economy per year. Of course, we rejected it wholesale. Why won't they give up on this cap and trade? Ben Cardin, Democrat senator from Maryland, calls global warming cap and trade the most significant revenue-generating proposal of our time. Repeat that. The most significant revenue-generating proposal of our time. You think Washington's going to give up easily on this? Not a chance. They've been waiting for decades for this. So what happens, though? Something's afoot. The people crying the loudest about man-made climate fears, like UK's James Lovelock, don't support what Congress is doing or what even the UN's doing. He says most of the green stuff is verging on a gigantic scam. And Daily Kos, the left-wing website, had a poll, and most of their readers agreed with him. This is about carbon trading. And James Lovelock is a man who thinks global warming is so bad there's only going to be a few dozen breeding couples left in the Arctic because the rest of the Earth is going to heat up. So the people screaming the loudest are rejecting the so-called solutions. NASA's James Hansen, cap and trade ineffectual, hopes it fails. They've referred to him as the Cindy Sheehan of the left now, because he was their darling for a while because he was always out in the media scaring people about global warming. But now that he's off the reservation when it comes to the congressional bill, people are pushing him aside and treating him with disrespect, his former friends. He's getting a quick lesson in how Washington works. Green Party candidate Ralph Nader. It's not going to work, cap and trade. It's too complex, too easily manipulated. Well, I would argue that's why they want it. It's too complex, it's too easily manipulated. They want something easily manipulated. He's going to call Markey and find out why he bought into it. I give Ralph Nader credit. He seems honest on a lot of these things, and he's dead on accurate about this. How bad is this climate bill? John McCain, who praised Al Gore last year, said the climate bill is a farce. I would not only not vote for it, I'm opposed to it entirely. John McCain's moment of clarity. He gets it. All right, that picture's not that flattering. I'm just looking. The best line to sum up what's going on in Washington: a lot of people will get filthy rich doing nothing for the environment. That sums up global warming, cap and trade. If you get nothing else from when someone talks to you about cap and trade, that's the only line you need to know. Al Gore went from a $1 to $2 million net worth after vice presidency, now at a $100 million net worth, in large part due to his climate advocacy. He's on the way. If all these mandates and carbon trading goes, he has a company, his partners invested $1 billion in 40 different companies. He's on the way to being the world's first carbon billionaire. And it's not through entrepreneurship. It's going to be through lobbying, political manipulation, fear, ideology, and government mandates. But he's on his way. He will be the world's first carbon billionaire. The Bill Gates of global warming. This is just some of what's going on. Obama's plan could cost $2 trillion, nearly 3 times the initial estimate. Imagine that. The initial estimate wasn't accurate. Keep in mind, the cap and trade is bigger than Bush's bank bailout and Obama's stimulus combined in terms of a cost on the economy. This is not some marginal thing. Controlling carbon is a bureaucrat's dream. If you control carbon, you control life. If it's a bureaucrat's dream, Washington is a field of dreams right now because they're all just chomping at the bit for this. This was MIT scientist Richard Lindzen. In fact, his point is very well taken. In the UK, there's proposals for a carbon card issued to each individual. You would have, your government would monitor your driving, your flying, your home thermostat, any activity you did energy-wise that used up, that made your carbon footprint bigger. If you exceed your personal carbon limit, you would owe the government money. If you're under it, you would qualify for a subsidy. Will Happer, the Princeton physicist, testified before our committee. It's a level of control that George Orwell didn't even contemplate in his book, 1984. When you control CO2, you control life. Even the Washington Post, as foggy as they are, realize that current global warming proposals require a wholesale transformation of our nation's economy and society. Nancy Pelosi went to China, of all places, and said that we need to have a complete inventory on every aspect of our lives, Americans do, to reduce our carbon footprint. They're coming for us. This is way beyond how much it's going to cost the economy or how many jobs it's going to cost. This is about controlling, even in your home. California's already proposed controlling thermostats in your home, how hot and cold you can keep it. This is not scaremongering. These are actual proposals with names and co-sponsors. This is frightening stuff. A climate change response must have at its heart a redistribution of wealth and resources. First of all, have we talked about science? These are all the biggest campaigners for global warming, and none of them care about the science. It's all about what left-wing command and control economic regulatory act they can get through under any justification. And this is why the whole thing is a true farce in Washington. Even if we faced a climate catastrophe, Kyoto would have had no detectable impact. That's assuming they were right on the science, which they're not, and that's assuming full compliance, which they never got. Wouldn't even be a detectable difference in temperature, assuming they were right on the science. So a purely symbolic bill. There's no detectable impact. They raise home heating, result in economic harm, especially the poor. Obama's own advisor, Warren Buffett, called the climate bill a huge regressive tax. This current climate bill the Senate's looking at this fall, scientifically meaningless. It would only avoid 5 years of warming. Again, that's assuming they're right on the science, which they're not, and that's assuming the bill works as it's intended, which it won't. It's going to end up being bastardized and changed even from where it is. But these analyses are showing that if we did face a catastrophe, why is Congress proposing bills that would have no impact on the climate? The EPA has gone even further and said not only will it not impact temperatures, this bill won't even impact global CO2 levels. In other words, it fails on all counts. It's pure symbolism out of Washington. And yet Obama will come out and say this bill will leave our planet cooler. We had one congressman, I think Butterfield, came out and said this bill will save our planet. It won't even impact CO2 levels or temperature, what they're worried about, and they're making these claims. $1.8 trillion, equivalent of $4,500 tax. These estimates are all floating depending on how the final bill comes. But here's the bottom line. And Barbara Boxer used to say, we need an insurance policy in case the skeptics are wrong. Well, would you buy home insurance that had huge upfront premium for virtually no payout? Because that's exactly what Washington's proposing here. If you would buy that kind of home insurance, then Washington has a deal for you. It's literally saying this will solve global warming, but it won't impact CO2, won't impact global temperature. But that's assuming they're right in the science. Again, it's not skeptics saying it. These are not in dispute. The bill is pure symbolism. So where are the American people? Is this information trickling down, or are they mind-numb robots following Al Gore? Well, a Pew survey of January this year, 20 out of 20 issues, healthcare, war, terrorism, etc., global warming, dead last. Rasmussen poll, only 34% blame humans for warming, the lowest finding yet, and it's a reversal from a year ago. Gallup actually noted the outpouring of scientists around the world as one of the key reasons people are growing skeptical. Gallup poll editor, just in May, Gore has failed. Public is just not that concerned about global warming. We seem less concerned the more about global warming over the years. This is the biggest shocker. Among environmental issues, not all issues, not healthcare, not terrorism, not economics, among environmental issues, global warming is not only dead last, but in the negative category, the lowest Gallup ever measured. And I'll show that to you in a moment. But, I mean, they're worried about pollution. They're worried about deforestation. They're worried about clean water. Global warming is -6. Not only don't they care, I don't know how you can get I don't know how you can get any less caring than the negative. Global warming is the only issue for which Americans say they have little to no concern, and that they have a great deal of concern. It's clearly the environmental issue of least concern. Keep in mind, the key word there is environmental. It's the issue of least concern among all issues, and now it's among environmental issues. So why is Congress worried about passing a bill when the American people are rejecting any reason for it? And this is not a GOP pollster. This is Gallup polling, no hotbed of conservatism or skeptics. So, we have a history of these failed eco-alarms. Global cooling of the 70s, overpopulation, the chemical DDT, pesticide, resource scarcity, famine, Amazon rainforest. Yet through all of this, we've gotten cleaner air, cleaner water, economic growth has increased, people are living longer, healthier. So the question is, as these fears collapse, what will environmental alarmists switch to next? Any guesses? What would, we've already mentioned all those. The most recent was rainforest scares of the 90s. Now it's global warming. What do you think might be the next issue? Any guesses? Climate change? Which one? UFOs. All right, we'll close. Here's a clue. He's not getting enough what? Oxygen. This is actual headline, UK paper last year. The oxygen crisis. Could the decline of oxygen in the atmosphere undermine our health and threaten human survival? The UK Guardian. There exists a more serious crisis than CO2. The oxygen levels are dropping. Human activity has decreased it. This is what the Green Party in the UK, they're already sensing, hey, we better get ready. We got to start some test marketing of the next scare. But there's another one on there, and this one's got a more prominent proponent. Remember The Graduate? Plastics. Well, this is it. Lori David, Al Gore's producer. Drum roll. Plastic waste is in some ways more alarming to us humans than global warming. Think about it. CO2 controls everything. You know, whether your backyard barbecue, your thermostat in your home, everything you could possibly do, driving, flying. What could they get to replace CO2 that would be all-encompassing? Plastic. It's in children's toys. It's in your car. It's in your home. It's in hotel rooms. It's in airplanes. It's everywhere. If they start a war and try to regulate plastic and the manufacturing of plastic and the distribution, they could get their next CO2. Lori David's just July 31st, Huffington Post. This is what she's touting. I'm not saying this will be it, but I think they're test marketing because they sense global warming is slipping away and slipping away quickly from them. So why am I showing tarot cards? Because when you lost the science, you lose public opinion. You're even now they're losing Washington. Democrat senators just this morning are saying they want to delay the climate bill vote till next year. Skepticism's working. We're actually winning on something for once. So, but why am I showing tarot cards in a global warming discussion? Well, let's take a look. Obama's Energy Secretary, Chu. At no other time in history of science have we been able to say what the future will be 100 years from now, unquote. He honestly believes he knows what imagine in 1909, a senior White House advisor predicting what the year 2009 would be like. He would have been laughed at in 1909 America. But Stephen Chu's accorded with some degree of respect I can understand. So this is what I say. Shouldn't Chu be touting these predictions of the year 2100 on a boardwalk with a full deck of tarot cards? I mean, he's telling people, science tells him for certain, I don't know if it's whispering in his ear or what the Earth is going to be like. He's believing these climate models which violate the basic principles of forecasting, which don't account for half the variability in nature, and which the UN says aren't reliable. That's our Energy Secretary, Chu. Japanese scientist Kanya Kusano, man-made climate fear promotion is now akin to ancient astrology. Let's explore this. Mathematical physicist Frank Tipler from Tulane University. Whether the ice caps melt or expand, whatever happens, the man-made warming theorists claim it confirms their theory. A perfect example of a pseudoscience like astrology. It is obvious anthropogenic global warming is not science at all. This is the heart of the movement now because they've adapted. Record cold, global warming. Record heat, global warming. Too many tornadoes, global warming. Lack of tornadoes, global warming. Too many hurricanes, global. By the way, hurricanes, 50-year low. And Al Gore cited two scientists in his film just 3 years ago, Tom Knutson and Carrie Emanuel, two scientists. They now are reconsidering their view. The two most alarming scientists on hurricanes and global warming are now saying that they're reconsidering, saying global warming is going to have either a positive impact or no impact on hurricanes, assuming we get the warming. So that whole thing has collapsed on them. But the bottom line is, no matter what happens, they can say it's global warming. Floods, droughts, hurricanes, storms. In fact, if you read your horoscope every day, it's written in such a way that no matter what happens to you that day, you can say, hey, my horoscope predicted it. That's what the global warming science has been reduced to, the level of your newspaper horoscope. Now, congressional weather makers. Barbara Boxer, I used to work with. I actually traveled to Greenland with Barbara Boxer in 2007 on a fact-finding mission. It was so cold the final day that Barbara Boxer and the other Democrat senators were huddled in their boat as we went around our chartered boat, emitting CO2, looking at the supposedly melting Greenland. They were huddled out. It was too cold for them to be out on the deck. They were in the heated, that's not a joke. We also chartered helicopters, planes, and went all over Greenland with a huge, massive carbon footprint to investigate it, and we found out that Greenland actually had cooled or stabilized since 1940, and that the rate of warming was much higher in the 1920s, and that nothing unusual other than a normal summer was going on. But Barbara Boxer, at a press conference when we came back, spun that to say, we talked to people who said it was much colder when they were younger. Right, it was colder in the 50s and 60s, but if you go back and talk to their parents and grandparents, it would have been much warmer. It's called natural cycles, Barbara, Senator Boxer, and that's what, you know, we were able to, as a Senate, working for Senator Inhofe was great. We did a whole scientific review, point-by-point rebuttal. We got ABC News to give us fair coverage and took away the thunder from their big PR coup of going to Greenland. Now, why is Obama, wait, forget about why, okay. This may be a bum rap on Obama, but I'm showing you this to remind you. This was the G8 summit that was held in L'Aquila, Italy, just last month. At this summit, aside from doing other official business, Obama and the Western leaders agreed to this. They agreed to, quote, a goal of keeping world temperatures from rising no more than 2 degrees Celsius. So you can relax now. Forget about Al. You watched Al Gore's film. Obama and the Western leaders have agreed they're going to control the Earth's thermostat, and they're not going to set it for more than 2 degrees higher. We should all be rest assured. Here's what UK scientist Philip Stott wrote. Hubris, as if climate were neatly controlled by a single dimmer light switch that can be twiddled up and down at the whim of pompous politicians. It gets better. The same week that Obama was controlling the Earth's thermostat, Ugandans blamed angry gods for bad weather. The Kilimanjaro in Uganda blamed the spell of calamities like drought, disease to the angry gods. AllAfrica.com wrote, little do they know that their area is suffering the consequences of a larger problem, climate change. So my question is very simple. Which is more plausible? Ugandans blaming bad weather on angry gods, or educated Western leaders believing they can control Earth's temperatures? Who goes with Ugandans here versus Western leaders? This is the problem here today. The Ugandans are looked at as backwards. Oh, they need to be educated. And the Western leaders are looked at as enlightened. They have it all backwards. We're not finished. This is as plausible as Obama and the G8 leaders pledge. True story. Naked farm girls plow parched fields and bid to embarrass weather gods and bring badly needed monsoon rain. This is just July 24th, 2 weeks after Obama's summit. They chanted ancient hymns after sunset to invoke the gods in India. Once again, who do we vote for? Do we vote for the naked farm girls, or do we vote for the G8 leaders? Who has it right? My vote goes for the naked farm girls before I would believe Western leaders can control the Earth's thermostat. Okay. So this is the answer to my questions I've just been asking you. Ordinary people see through man-made climate fears, but educated people are very vulnerable. And that's MIT climate scientist Richard Lindzen. You don't get any more prominent than that. That quote should be read and reread, because that's the heart of this issue. So many people have overeducated themselves and become so arrogant that they turn their nose up if you don't buy it. So in other words, you're supposed to sit there and watch Obama and the world leaders say, we're going to limit Earth's temperatures. Oh, that sounds pretty good. Oh, look at those backwards naked farm girls or those backwards Ugandans. They need to be educated. How silly of them to blame weather on angry gods when we know it's the Western leaders who can control that thermostat by just signing some legislation. This is our world today, and that's the answer. Ordinary people see through it. educated, or vulnerable. I guess that makes us a bunch of rubes. I'm not sure. Okay, Obama in 2008. Get ready. My presidency will be the moment when the rise of the oceans began to slow and our planet began to heal. He also claimed he could block the sun's rays. So the oceans, let's see. Hallelujah, hallelujah. No joke. Global sea level, July, slight downtrend. Obama's in office 6 months. Sea level is dropping. Update shows a slowdown. Hallelujah. How can we deny this man? He called it. He was like Babe Ruth. He called it. He did it. Okay, have we advanced? Salem witch trials. Women suspected of being witches were accused of changing the weather. Sound familiar? Driving our SUV changes the weather? Have we advanced? I'm showing Aztecs now. Aztec priests encouraged people to sacrifice blood to the gods to end severe drought in 1450. Sacrificed thousands of people in a few weeks. Once again, don't drive your car, turn your thermostat low, buy a hybrid. You can control the weather. Hey, other people thought the same thing. Slaughter some people. That can control the weather. Modern belief mankind controls climate, not that different from ancient civilizations making sacrifices to the gods of nature. That's Roy Spencer, climatologist formerly with NASA. He is now speaking out like he's never spoken out before. That is a true sentence. Who are the modern day sacrifices? If the witches were killed because of weather concerns, if the Aztecs slaughtered people, well, where are today's modern sacrifices? Where are they if it's really happening? Well, the average African lifespan is lower today than it was in the US and Europe 100 years ago. But Africans are told we shouldn't develop because now that these countries are rich beyond anything Africans can imagine, they're worried about global warming. That's a Ugandan activist, just July 29th. I interviewed former Governor of California, Jerry Brown, at the Earth Summit in Johannesburg, South Africa. He told me point blank, the developed world can't develop like the Western world because the Earth can't handle it. We'd need 19 more Earths or something like that. This is a new form of colonialism. It's white, wealthy Western leaders telling poor people of color that you can't have what we have and you can't develop because they're worried about these unfounded concerns about global warming and the Earth. Telling Africans they can't have electricity and economic development is immoral. This is a true stat here. 28 million Ugandans have no electricity. So actually everyone in this room uses more electricity, but Gore uses more electricity in a week than 28 million Ugandans together use in a year. Now, what else is happening? In Chad, in Africa, people cannot cook. Chad's global warming ban on charcoal leads to desperate families. And here's their environmental minister, no doubt under pressure from the United Nations. Cooking is, of course, a fundamental necessity. On the other hand, with climate change, every citizen must protect his environment. So as you sit there in your huts made of dung, as the Western world flies around in their jets and SUVs and has modern amenities and lower infant mortality, long life expectancy, you need to worry about global warming. You're the easiest to control. So the UN, all these wealthy white Westerners, I'm going to keep saying white because this really is almost a racial thing when you look at this from a global perspective. 1.6 billion people don't have electricity, and they're predominantly people of color. Continuing on this, poor Kenyans rebel as UK grocery stores' carbon-friendly policies may stop food exports. This was Tesco, a UK grocery store, was wanting to lower their carbon footprint. They were going to stop importing food from Kenya, devastating the local Kenyans. India has said flatly, it is morally wrong for us to reduce emissions when 40% of Indians do not have access to electricity. Black clergyman protest Robert Redford link his environmentalism to racism. Robert Redford's opposed to drilling, opposed to cheap, affordable energy, supports all these global warming bills. Who does that impact? It impacts people of color, senior citizens, anyone on a fixed income. This is the real deal when it comes to environmentalism. And Robert Redford, they actually got a lot of media in January when they did this. Al Gore and UN Eva DeBoer tell us the world needs to go on an energy diet. Well, I have news. Africans are already on an energy diet. We're starving. So what does Time magazine do? It declares the Model T, I guess Time was a slow news week. Time magazine, the Model T, one of the worst cars of all time. The consequences of putting every living soul on a gas-powered wheels are piling up, from the air in our cities to the sand under our soldiers' boots. First of all, the air is cleaner. Second of all, would Time magazine rather have, let's go back to 1900 when New York City was filled with E. coli-ridden horse manure from all the horses? This is completely consistent with the modern environmental movement. I talk to Friends of the Earth. at the UN Earth Summit, they said mankind lives sustainably only until 1900 on Earth. In other words, they wanted to deny the entire 20th century advances because it wasn't, quote, Earth-friendly. The bottom line, carbon-based economies are one of the greatest liberators of mankind in the history of our planet. Life used to be nasty, brutish, and short, and still is for the 1.6 billion people or more estimated with no electricity. Carbon-based energy allowed unprecedented 20th century advances. But under this global warming bill before Congress, Americans would be allowed to emit the same carbon volumes as citizens did in 1867. Yes, it's back to the 19th century. And here's the bottom line. If the Earth were truly facing a climate crisis and the proposals of the UN and Congress were our only hope, we would all be doomed. Because in 20 years, the UN and Congress has not proposed a single proposal that would have had any detectable impact on the climate, any realistic proposal that any of the developing world would go on. It's pure symbolism. And that's what we're facing here. If we did face a crisis, why would we pass a bill that would have no impact? So the question to ask at town halls, what impact will the congressional bill have on temperatures? And the answer is scientifically meaningless. What will the bill cost? Trillions to our economy, thousands per family per year. Why vote for a bill with a huge economic impact and no climate impact? There's no answer to that other than it's the greatest revenue-generating proposal of our time, as Democrat Senator Ben Cardin said. Why are more and more scientists rejecting man-made climate fears? Because the only way you can believe them is to wish for tornadoes on people to kill them to try to convince them. That's why. It's anti-science. I leave you with this. Never underestimate the ability of Congress to offer costly non-solutions to problems that don't even exist. And that's my note of pessimism. That's very possibly what could happen. The House climate bill, there was no reason in the world that should have passed. It had no chance of passing. It would have lost by 70 or more votes. Except the Democrats pumped millions of dollars into vulnerable swing vote Democrats who were hesitant to vote. They twisted the arms and they promised multi-million-dollar research facilities in all kinds of congressional districts. That bill was just strong-armed through. The same is possible in the Senate. Although 10 Democratic senators, and I believe Al Franken was one, came out and said they can't support the bill and they're worried about economic costs. So the Democrats can't even swallow this one, especially during a recession. But just keep in mind this quote, because anything is possible. So with that, I'll take any questions you have. And the bottom line is we are winning this scientifically, public opinion. We're winning it with the real-world temperature data. But it's it doesn't mean Washington is going to follow suit, because Washington can do anything they want, especially when you have 60 Democrat senators and a Democratic president. If you have questions, there's a microphone in the back if you want to go back there and ask anything.